welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week we're going to be exploring Bigfoot in Sweden. And this episode comes from a listener story. And I'm going to talk about his story, and he's got some evidence, a photograph that he wanted me to look at. And he was very gracious enough to allow me to talk about his story on the air, share the photo, talk about his story. There's not a lot of Bigfoot stories from Sweden, and this listener, Axel, he mentions that, and I don't think he's saying that this is a Bigfoot print. He honestly just wanted me to take a look at it and let him know what I thought. But he freely admits that there's not a lot of Bigfoot history or stories or legends in Sweden or in Scandinavia. Scandinavia is Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. So I'm going to be looking at some stories from Scandinavia today. There aren't very many, so this may be a shorter episode. I'm still dealing with this lingering cough from the flu I had weeks and weeks ago. It's getting a little bit better each day, but not really noticeably. I notice it more like week to week, more than day to day. But it's just been a terrible cough, and as I talk, it gets worse, and then I have to clear my throat. So again, lots of edits, but I'm very grateful for Axel for letting me talk about his story. So we'll talk about his story, and then I did manage to find a couple of other possible Bigfoot stories from Scandinavia on the interwebs. But like I said, they're few and far between. Whatever information is out there is very scarce. There's just not a lot. We hear about Bigfoot all over the world. Of course, the Yeti, the abominable snowman, the Yowie in Australia, the Yeren in China. I mean, there's just in Russia. There's just so many hairy humanoid stories from across the world, but Scandinavia doesn't really have many, which is curious because the landscape is very similar to like Canada. It's northern, piney forests, coniferous forests. You'd think that there would be Bigfoot there, but there aren't. There aren't very many sightings. So it makes you wonder, is it just a scarce population? Is it just not there? Or are people just not seeing it? So we will talk about some of those stories in this episode. So let me get to Axel's story, and I'm just going to throw up the photo of what he found, and I'm going to just go back and forth through our email correspondence because that's kind of how I got the information. Again, he's in Sweden, so I'm grateful for him for speaking English. His English is very good. I can't speak a foreign language. I can speak un pequeño español. That's it. And even that's CSC. So kudos to him. And Axel, thank you so much for listening to the podcast and for writing to me and sharing your story. And I'm going to share it with the viewers now. So everybody, let's get to Axel's story. Okay, so like I said, here's the photo of what Axel found. And I'm just going to read our correspondence, basically, just so you guys get a sense of what he found. And I'm going to let you guys decide what you think of this. Obviously, if you're listening on an audio only version of this, I will post links to the photo below so you can click on it and just take a look at the photo and let us know what you think, or you guys can make your own determinations. But just so you can see what he sent me, this is his photo. So he writes, "Hello, my name is Axel, and I live in a small town in Sweden called Ulricehamn. I'm listening to your pod, Odd and Untold, a great deal. It is a very interesting pod, so thanks for it. I'm especially interested in Bigfoot. In Sweden, we don't have the same tradition of Bigfoot as you have in the USA and Canada. But I have found a few stories from my homeland, and in September 18th, 2022, I found an odd footprint in a forest near my home. It looks a bit like a footprint from a Bigfoot. I'm sending a photo of it to you so you can see for yourself. What do you think about it?" So I took a look at the photo and I wrote back to him. I said, "Hi, Axel. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm not familiar with Swedish legends or cryptids. I know there's like trolls and all that sort of stuff from Norway, but I think that's different than Bigfoot. So I haven't really heard of many Bigfoot sightings in Sweden. But I say, like you, I haven't heard of any Bigfoot creatures there, but this is a very interesting photo. It definitely looks like a typical Bigfoot print. Do you know approximately how long it was? I can definitely make out a heel at the back and what looks like toes, including a big toe towards the front. Very interesting. So yeah, if you're looking at the footprint, there's nothing really there for scale. So I had to ask how big it was. So he wrote back, "Hi, Jason. Thank you for your answer. I think the footprint was 20 centimeters long. So 20 centimeters is a little over 7 inches. So not very big at all. And he admits that. So it was not big as many other Bigfoot prints I have heard of, but I've heard of small prints. What do you think about that? It was very interesting. Thank you. My print looks like, do you think my print looks like a typical Bigfoot print? Thanks again. Um, so yeah, there's many reports of smaller footprints. It does look like a human print. I had asked him if anybody could have been walking around barefoot because again, 7 inches, that's probably the size of a teenage human footprint, very young teen or, older preteen, uh, small woman. I mean, this could have been somebody walking around barefoot. So I asked him that question and he wrote back, it would not be likely at all for a person to be walking around barefoot there, I think. The area is fairly inaccessible and remote, so it is seldom visited by people, I think, even though there is some houses and farms nearby. So it is weird to find barefoot prints in mud or dirt. Uh, People typically don't walk around barefoot in certain places. You get these remote places, but very possible. I mean, and I think he's using some critical thinking here. Again, he's not saying it's Bigfoot. He's asking my opinion, and we are asking your opinion. What do you guys think? It is small. It's a very small footprint, and it looks human-like. And Bigfoot prints look very human-like, so it's very difficult to say what this is. But I did appreciate him reaching out and sharing this because he found it odd. And again, I'm not familiar with Sweden. I'm not familiar with this town that he lives in, obviously. I've never been there. But he is. So I think when people notice something weird in their environment, it's worth paying attention to. It doesn't mean it's anything, but it's always worth questioning. It's always worth saying, hey, why is there this barefoot print here? What does it mean? Was it just a person walking through? And that's the most likely answer. But I do think it's interesting when people who are familiar with an area uh, or familiar with the skies above their home or familiar with their home hear things or see things or experience things that they know are out of the ordinary and pay attention to it, because a lot of people would just walk by this footprint and say, oh, it's just a person. But, I think these things are always worth a closer look. So again, we corresponded back and forth, and he wrote back that he was happy that I would be using the photo on the show and the story. And he said, it was very exciting for me to find the footprint because I'm very interested in the question of if there is some kind of Bigfoot here in Sweden and in other parts of Europe. So it was very interesting for me to hear you talk about Bigfoot in the British Isles on your show. Again, people think of Bigfoot, they automatically think of the US and Canada. They don't really think about other places. I have even read a bit about it on some news articles in the internet. I've also read about some findings of Bigfoot prints in the British Isles. I've even seen some photos of it on the internet. As I had mentioned already, there's not many Bigfoot stories from Sweden, but some years ago, I heard an interview on a TV show with a woman who had found man-like footprints in the snow in a place called Tornadalen in northern Sweden. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. Tornadalen. She didn't mention Bigfoot. Instead, she talked about supernatural beings. So this reminded me a little bit of the big gray man of Ben Makdu in Scotland. These supernatural humanoid figures, giants that aren't quite Bigfoot, but you can see some parallels in the legends. But I immediately thought of Bigfoot. And then there is a Bigfoot photo that is taken outside of a town called Katrineholm. It is a very blurry photo, but you can find it if you search for Bigfoot in Katrineholm at Google. So that is a story I'm going to talk about next. But I do want to know what you guys think of Axel's photo here, because it does look interesting to me. I mean, it's small. It does have the basic shape of a human footprint. It does look a little wide for a child or a woman. Again, a little over 7 inches. Let's call it 8 inches. Just weird. And again, he says that this was found in a place that was very remote and people wouldn't go to. So just very interesting. It's also a very deep footprint. I mean, hard to say. So I will keep in contact with Axel and just see if he finds anything else on in the forest where he found this. But again, I appreciate that he is curious. I appreciate that he is questioning it. I appreciate that he's not saying, I found a big footprint. He's just saying, hey, I found this little footprint and it is weird that it's there. Like nobody should be walking barefoot back here. It's remote. People don't really go there. Why is there this human footprint in the mud, this human like footprint? And again, we all know that animals can double step in their footprints and create things like this. And so it could be any number of things, but it does definitely look like you have some toes at the front here and a heel at the back. And it generally looks like a quote unquote Bigfoot footprint, even though it's small. So juvenile, maybe, who knows? So let me know what you guys think down below. I'm guessing this is probably just either a human footprint or a misidentification, animals double stepping in a print, or one animal print and then another animal steps in it, and it just creates this Bigfoot looking print. Deserves a little bit further look, but my guess is probably not Bigfoot. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Okay, so again, I want to thank Axel for sending in his story and the photo. And again, even if it's not Bigfoot, it's still cool just to explore these things, just to get to the truth. Even if we're debunking things, that is research. So thanks to Axel for that. And I'm going to move on to the next story, the one that he mentioned. There's this other story in Katrineholm, and this is also in Sweden. And this is the only other real big story I was able to find that looks interesting. And I just want to give credit to the crypto crew and Crypto Sweden. They're the ones who kind of talking about the story. I'm getting most of the information from this from the Crypto Crew website. I'm going to link to that below in the description so you guys can find it. And there are links in here to Crypto Sweden, which is a Facebook page. And they talk about cryptids in Sweden. But this one has a photo of what looks to be possibly a Bigfoot. And I will put a larger photo on screen for you guys. But I'm going to read this. And again, it's a blurry photo. It's taken from a distance. It could be anything, but I'm going to read some of the story. And again, you guys can make up your own mind about what this might be. So the Crypto Crew writes, the above picture and reports come from the Katrineholm, Sweden area. It could possibly be of an actual Bigfoot, or as many call them, trolls. I had to do some digging to find information about this report, but I managed to find it. So again, I don't know if the trolls legend is directly related to Bigfoot. I mean, it could be, stone giants, trolls. I mean, it's all sort of interrelated, I suppose. The trolls don't seem to be hairy humanoids. They just seem to be giant people. You don't hear the same sort of things about the troll legends, but who knows? Who knows? So they continue. The story goes like this. The witness was out taking a walk. He eventually sees two deer and starts to take a picture when this possible Bigfoot runs out. The reason this was a difficult report to find a lot of information on is the fact that it is from 2011 and the witness wanted to remain anonymous. I did find an excellent write-up of it, along with a witness interview. I want to share it here and give full credit to Crypto Sweden for this information. I will also add additional information after, along with some photo enhancements. So yeah, you have a witness who you can't really track down. You have a report from 2011. The photo is blurry. It's not like, a 2024 iPhone taking a picture of something, which would be a lot crisper. But if you look at the photo, it is interesting. So here is some information from Crypto Sweden. The picture was first posted on the Swedish website fragbite.se the day after, November 24th, 2011, with the following comments. So this is the witness talking now. I was walking along the illuminated track here in the woods with my MP3 earphones in when I felt a presence. I snatched my headphones out and then heard a rustling and felt vibrations in the ground, similar to a moose bull walking. I walked further about 100 meters or so when I get this feeling that this thing's moving besides me. Just as I pass a small clearing in the forest, two deer are passing by, and when I'm taking a quick photo, this bastard is caught on the picture. I'm all upset now, had to write about it. The picture was taken in the woods outside Katrineholm, east of the illuminated track, not Forsio track, but it's on the other side of Highway 52. So here's a little snippet of an interview. So the interviewer says, "What was the exact date and time you observed the animal?" Witness says the date was one day before I posted it, so November 23rd, 2011, time between 2 and 3 p.m. This is during the dark season of the year, but it did not obscure, so it may not have been very late. The image is dark because it's cloudy and it had just been raining. Interviewer, what were your thoughts and how did you feel seeing the animal? Did you see the animal when you took the photos or did you see it later? So the witness replies, I'm walking along the illuminated trails and paths in the forest, as I often do on weekends when I'm home from the city I study in. Usually I see a deer during my walks, with few exceptions. It is often the same group of deer, 3 smaller ones. So when I hear something moving in the bushes, I'm prepared for them. Sorry, this is written a little strangely. And make myself ready with the camera, waiting for the clearing in the terrain to come. This is where and when the picture is taken. I just registered something big and dark and with the same color as a moose, but thought it looked very strange. As my first thoughts are moose or wild boar, I don't follow, but move a bit to the left. From my new position, the 2 spruces that the creature is moving behind has moved to the right visual field, so I can't follow the group on the other side. They continue, I felt no anxiety at all at this point, as I've almost run and skied into the moose at several occasions. So I guess him skiing or just walking, he's bumped into moose, and moose can be very dangerous, especially during the rutting season. When I first looked up at the picture, that shivers were sent down my spine. So they ask, what kind of camera did you use? Were you just taking a walk or did you do something else? He replies, my former phone, a Nokia 6600i slide. No, I was just out walking. They ask, have you ever seen something like this later or previously in life? Are you familiar with stories of these animals from this area, or do you know anyone who may have seen or talked about something like this? The witness says, no, never. Although I grew up very close to the tree line and spent a whole lot of time in the forest after school, even until nighttime. So Katrineholm, Sweden is located in the inland of Södermanland and is the 3rd largest urban area in the country. Many people may not have given Sweden much thought when it comes to Bigfoot reports, but there seems to be a growing number of reports from the area. So, again, you have another witness who's never heard of these stories, who grew up near the woods, has not seen a Bigfoot previously or after. It doesn't sound like he was out looking for Bigfoot. It just, this is someone who's out on a walk and sees these deer and was ready with his camera to take a picture of the deer, heard something, felt it in the ground, so thought it was something big, maybe a moose, and was ready to take a picture. And this thing crosses his path and he takes a picture of it. Now, again, could this be a hoax? I mean, looking at the photo, it definitely seems to be a dark figure. I mean, it's not a tree, it's not a stump. It looks like a dark figure walking on 2 legs. And again, it's a blob squatch. You can't see much detail. It's just dark. It looks like something walking on 2 legs. Is this matrixing? Is this just our eyes seeing something? Who knows? If it was a hoax, I don't know why he'd want to remain anonymous, or she. Doesn't really say who this person was, but they are anonymous, and we just don't know. It's just this photo from a long time ago, and hard to say what this is. It's a blob squatch. It is not proof of anything, but it's interesting that you have a witness testimony, you have a photo to go along with it, and they're choosing to remain anonymous. They're not trying to get any money out of this. They're not trying to get any fame. Who knows? Who knows? It's an interesting photo, but a lot of Bigfoot stuff is interesting, but inconclusive. It's there. You have a footprint, you have a photo, you have a story. They can be interesting, but there's nothing conclusive about this. I do think it's an interesting photo. It is daytime. It is fairly clear that there's something there. It's just hard to say what it is exactly. I mean, this could be the hindquarters of a moose behind the trees. It could be Bigfoot. It could be a guy in a costume. It could be photoshopped. Who knows? What do you guys think? Let me know down below what you guys think of the Katrineholm, Sweden photo of this alleged Bigfoot. Okay, so I have 2 more things I want to talk about here. This one is from Cryptozoocity. This is the website. I will link to them below. Again, I want to give credit where credit is due. I'm just kind of reading from other people's research here. But like I said, there's very little online about Scandinavian Bigfoots, Bigfoot in Sweden or Norway. But this is an article from Cryptozoocity, and I will read this to you guys. Is there a Scandinavian Bigfoot? The legends about trolls might indicate a long history of sightings. There has been a small number of reports from Sweden and Norway. So again, like I said, small number of reports. They are there, but there's really not a lot to grip onto. And a lot of the reports I was finding were like a sentence. Woman sees footprints in snow, and that's it. Like very little information as far as date or time or location or any other details. So I'll continue here. A type of wild man, the snowmannen or Bigfoot, so snowmannen, snowman, purportedly inhabits northern Scandinavia in Lapland and the Arctic regions of Norway, Sweden, and Finland. It is described as a dark, ape-like creature covered in thick, dirty, stinky hair. The face is broad with prominent brow ridges, nose pressed flat with a mouth that juts out from a huge jaw. Sound familiar? And yeah, I was going to mention that. It does sound very familiar. This sounds pretty much like the North American Bigfoot. Smelly, dark hair, dirty, broad face, brow ridges, flat nose, the mouth protruding. So definitely sounds like the traditional stereotypical Bigfoot. The following report has been collected by Jan Ove Sundberg. This report is from an area north of Stockholm. And again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing things. I don't have a very good grasp of the Swedish or Scandinavian Nordic languages. There are lots of pine woods in that area, which sounds familiar. So again, these piney coniferous forests, again, sounds like Pacific Northwest, Canada. In the summer of 1985, a Swedish radio reporter talked about strange growls being heard in the province of Hälsingland. Two elderly moose hunters described how they had been tracking something big and smelly and finally released their dogs to give chase. The dogs came back with their tails between their legs and were terrified, said Carl Johansson from Bollnäs. A couple of months before this, a woman who remains anonymous went out to a recreation area at Vaxna to clean the family cabin ready for the summer holiday. She suddenly heard what she described as pretty heavy feet moving around outside. She sensed that this was not an ordinary intruder and actually hid under a bed. She says, I never saw the creature, but when 1 hour had passed, I got up and went outside and then found giant footprints in the garden and around my house, she told Jan. She claimed that the footprints measured 45 centimeters in length and were 30 centimeters wide, so much bigger than the ones that Axel found. These are probably 16, 18 inches long, if my math is correct, and I'm just approximating there, so forgive me if I'm incorrect, but like 2.5 times what Axel had found. Following this, a couple of weeks later, two teenage girls were skinny dipping in a nearby pond when they suddenly heard someone or something moving about in the thick undergrowth nearby. Teasing and calling the intruder a pervert who spied on nude girls, they moved closer and closer towards the shore, planning to surprise or even catch the culprit. Instead, something right out of a nightmare suddenly rose up in front of them. Tina, 15, told Jan, it resembled an ape, but it was uglier and very large. So that's very interesting. Her friend Petra, 16, agreed and says that at the same time, a terrible stench came from the creature, which growled at them, pounding its chest. So that sounds very gorilla-like, very primate-like. And again, some of these stories you're hearing the growls, the howls, the stench, a lot of similar characteristics that you hear from a North American Sasquatch. So very interesting. Tina and Petra swam ashore a bit further down, ran through the woods without their clothes, and didn't stop until they were home, a couple of kilometers away. Petra's father didn't believe their story, but admitted that something had given the girls a pretty bad scare. I thought it must have been a bear, he said on the phone. There is bear in this area, and if one had a cub on the side, it could have seen the girls as a potential threat. The girls themselves, badly whipped by lashing branches during their hysterical run through the woods, said they did not see a bear, but something far more frightening. It was like a monster out of a movie, and it walked upright on 2 legs, Tina said. Even if it was ugly, it more resembled a man than an animal. So, yeah, I want to get back to this. Again, people always say it's a bear. It's a bear, it's a bear, it's a bear. You saw a bear. Even if you're not a hunter or an outdoors person or a camper or a hiker, we all know what bear look like. We all know what a bear looks like. They don't stand up too often. And even when they do, they look like bears. I mean, you can look at a silhouette of a bear. They don't have shoulders. They have ears. They don't look like apes. And again, you look at like the photo that I just showed from Kitchen Home. Uh, it could have been a bear. It's so far away. It's a photo. It's blurry. It's dark. It could have been a bear that he took a picture of. We could just call it that because it's very sort of ambiguous. These girls are saying they saw something that looked like a man, that it looked like a big, hairy man. It was standing upright on two legs. They seem very close to it. I mean, they're in the water. How far out were they? They swam back to shore pretty quickly and ran. Uh, People know when they see a bear. And again, if Bigfoot sightings aren't really prevalent in this area, why would they think Bigfoot? And they're not even saying Bigfoot; they're saying a man, a monster, like from a movie. So some people just can't wrap their heads around the unknown. So it doesn't matter if this thing was 8 feet tall and carrying a stick and throwing rocks and walking upright for half a mile. People are going to say, "Oh, you just saw a weird bear." And it doesn't make sense. It's you're trying to fit this square peg into a round hole. And I'm all for Occam's razor. I'm all for trying to explain things through rational means, but sometimes you just can't. Sometimes people see things that you really can't explain, and just by saying, "Oh, it must have been a bear," doesn't really make sense. And this sounds like one of those stories where it doesn't really make sense to say it was a bear. Yeah, there's bear in the area, but these girls are teenagers. They're old enough to know what a bear looks like, and if something freaked them out that much, I don't think they saw a bear. So last paragraph here. Another sighting took place just south of Bollnäs, Sweden. Mrs. Gustafsson and her husband not only saw the Swedish Bigfoot, but also heard it several times and even claimed they found its droppings. Quote, "It came quite close to our cabin and would kind of howl in the moonlight with a voice that reminded us of a human with a bass, very, very deep. We saw it more like a silhouette against the sky, and it never came so close so we could identify it properly," Mrs. Gustafsson said. "It was huge, powerful, and gave the impression of being primitive, but also intelligent." She also claims it had a whistling sound, and at times they would hear what was either an echo or another Bigfoot answering the call. When Mr. Gustafsson investigated the area in daylight, he found the classical large footprints and also fresh droppings. Its droppings reminded me of human excrement, and first I thought it was that, but they were left in such places a human never would go, and I always found it in the area where we had seen this creature. So, very interesting stories here. Again, you have the howls, you have them seeing this thing in silhouette. Again, not a perfect sighting. The story of Tina and Petra is much more interesting to me because they saw this thing apparently fairly up close. They got a good look at it, and that those stories are harder to dismiss. And again, they ran naked through the woods back home. I don't think two girls are making stuff up like that and running home and getting, cuts and scrapes from running through the woods naked to go back home because they saw a bear and they thought it was, they said even if it was ugly, it more resembled a man than an animal. So you have these teenagers who see a large man-like monster. It's not a bear. And black bear don't get that big, and they don't really walk on their hind legs. Just hard to say. This last sighting with the Gustafssons, they're hearing a call. And again, they say it may have been an echo. It may have been something responding. There's that room for doubt. And I like that. I like when people don't say, yeah, it was definitely a Bigfoot, or there were two Bigfoot, or there were 17 Bigfoot. But they're saying that there was a big animal. It was howling, very bassy, sounded human. Could it have been something else? Of course. But an interesting story to add to the stories of Sweden, because there aren't many. But this article has a few in here. And again, I wish there was a little bit more detail to some of these, but a little bit of evidence for Bigfoot in Sweden. And there's just one more story I want to talk about. And this one, I think I can debunk a little bit. Okay, so the last one I'm going to talk about, this one is from Reddit, and they mentioned two stories. One, the one from Katrineholm, Sweden, and they have the photo here. And there's another one, an alleged Bigfoot footprint from Norway around 2012. And they don't know from where. It's unknown. It's a photo, and I will just read the narrative for this. So this also looks like it comes from the Crypto Crew, but this is on Reddit, so I will link to this. So to quote the story, I found this. It's pretty weird. The weirdest thing is that I found it in a pretty remote place, and it's in Norway. What do you think? Me and my friend were walking, and we suddenly saw this ridiculously large track. I don't know what to make of it. Could easily be a hoax for all I know. Bigfoot is not a big thing in Norway, and I've never heard of them being here, so it's pretty strange. As I pointed out in the picture, my friend is a big guy, 6'4" or 6'5" and 220 pounds. He did not leave much of a mark in the sand/mud. If it's actually real, this thing would be ginormous. I would like to remain anonymous to avoid getting attention about it. There was another track, but it looked like some of the sheep or deer in the area had stepped in it. Luckily, they barely avoided the one I sent. So it should be noted that you can see the deer/sheep tracks off to the right of this print. I'll try to get a good photo of this and put it up. Could this creature have been hunting down one of the sheep or deer? This could be very possible. Another thing that should be pointed out is that this track appears to only have 3 toes, but one should remember that as big as this print is, the second toe could really be 2 toes. Same for the third. It's just hard to say for sure. So again, I will post a link to this photo. This one, I think, I mean, it definitely looks like a Bigfoot print superficially. The 3 toes, yeah, I could see maybe 2 toes and 2 toes, but it doesn't really look like that, especially for the little toe and like the ring toe. And to me, this looks, because I'm looking at the ground, and this looks like mud that has hardened and cracked. And again, it's hard to tell. This photo is very grainy. It's from 2012, so the technology wasn't great back then. But it looks superficially like a Bigfoot print. It just has that big toe, but it also looks like the ground has been cracked and gotten wet again, and then maybe cracked again. So this one is very hard to determine. I mean, I can see maybe a deer print down here in the lower right. I don't know. It is big enough to be a Bigfoot print. The toes, like I said, by the small toe, that doesn't make sense. It could be a 3-toed Bigfoot like we have here in the American South. It is big. It does look like a Bigfoot print, but there was a print that I found with Josh, and it looked like a Bigfoot print. And Josh is a skeptic. And when we found that print, I think briefly he may have been convinced that Bigfoot exists. And I thought I'd caught, like my holy grail of my paranormal life here, like Bigfoot print, and we debunked it. And we realized that it was a bear print that I had stepped in a few days before, and just, over time, it just looked like a Bigfoot print. This one, very hard to tell. Again, it's a grainy photo of a footprint. I appreciate the scale, the sense of scale here. You can tell it's bigger than an adult man's footprint. The toes don't look right to me. Of course, I could be wrong. But again, this looks like mud that has dried and maybe cracked. So this could just be animals trampling through it and disrupting the dirt, digging in the dirt. Who knows? But this is one very hard to really say for sure. It superficially looks like a Bigfoot print, but I've seen so many prints in the woods, camping and hiking, and just seeing stuff that looks like, a Bigfoot print when you first look at it. But then when you look a little deeper and can see the details in it, you can clearly tell it's not. And there's just not enough detail to tell one way or the other. But let me know what you guys think down below. And those are our Sweden stories for this week. All right, everybody. So again, I want to thank Axel for reaching out to me. Very, very cool guy. I appreciate you listening to the show, Axel. I'm amazed and humbled that I'm reaching Sweden. I tend to focus on like North America and just like the tri-state area, sometimes Pennsylvania, but Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Gettysburg sometimes. So it's really cool that I'm, reaching people in Sweden and in the British Isles and just all over the world. So very cool. And Axel was very gracious and answered all my questions and gave me permission to use his photo and his story and his name. So Axel, thank you so much, my friend. And I hope you continue to enjoy the show. And I hope you'd enjoyed this episode. And again, I'm sorry if I mispronounced any of the names from Sweden. I'm just not very good with the Swedish pronunciation. Um, so yeah, I think this was very cool to explore stories from a place where they don't really have a long tradition of Bigfoot. They do have the trolls, and maybe one day I'll do an episode on legends. I did legends of like Ireland and Scotland recently, cryptids and legends, like leprechauns and things like that, the Kelpie. But I think it would be cool to talk about the trolls and other things from like Scandinavia, because they do have a very rich uh, folklore there. And I'm part Norwegian. I mean, it goes way back, but I do have some Norwegian in me. So it would be cool to explore that and the troll legends and mythology. So one day maybe I will do that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. If you're listening on audio only, please leave us a review, however many stars you think we deserve. If you want to reach out to me like Axel did, shoot me an email, jason@oddanduntold.com. I will share your story. I will always ask permission if I can share your story. If you want to just keep it between you and me, we can do that too. I've had plenty of people reach out and say, please don't share this, but I want to tell you about this. I want your thoughts on this. And I've kept those stories private. I have a whole bunch of emails that I can't share because people ask me not to. And that's totally fine. I just appreciate that you guys share your stories with me, even if I can't share them with my audience. If you want to remain anonymous, you can remain anonymous. If you want to come on the show and talk to me, you can come on the show and talk to me. But jason@oddanduntold.com. And we have the merch store. So if you guys want mugs or t-shirts or hoodies, I'll link to that below. As always, that's down below. You guys can check that out. And I'm going to wrap it up here because my voice is about to die on me. I was up coughing again a lot last night, and I'm hoping by in another week or two this is done and I can stop talking about my stupid cough. But till next time, everybody, question everything. Question these photographs, question these footprints, question your beliefs, question, just because there aren't a lot of stories there, does that mean there's no Bigfoot? Who knows? Does Bigfoot even really exist? But question everything, and we'll see you next week, everybody. Rock and roll.